The documents, as Piaro Kujabi mentioned, is serious as his list of false papers continue.
We have forged documents of the Kanifing Municipal Council, forged documents of mask line, showing bills of loading and so on. Okay? False documents of the Gambia Electrical Group, and even false documents of issuance of land and so on. So the situation here is very, very serious. And this thing has been masterminded by just two persons. Now, we have long talked about internet fraud, internet crime, cybercrime, and so on. And we see it here at play.
The suspects, who are former convicts of similar crimes 5 years ago, only received a fine for their criminal activities. The PRO urged the public to be vigilant and report any such activity.
So the situation here is very serious, and we all need to put hands on deck. Let us collaborate, come out and partner with the police. Come and report your cases, no matter how serious they are, so that we can arrest this situation as soon as possible. We just can't let it go on the way it is.
PRO Kujabi then stated that Kairaba Police and the Gambia Police Force in general are not accommodating any criminals, let alone perpetrators of cyber and other organized crimes, notably false document production. Given the accessibility and perhaps the affordability of internet access and other communication gadgets, cybercrime seems to be increasing in the Gambia. Nonetheless, this menace could be reduced if not stopped if the public take greater responsibility of furnishing the police with information relating to any such dubious activity. Reporting for the news, I am Modu Bajan.
We'll take our first break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. A White House spokesperson said U.S. President Barack Obama is still weighing what course of action to take as the suspected chemical attack by Assad loyalists dominates the international news agenda. Mr. Obama has asked the administration to work on what he calls a compressed timeline to respond to the suspected attacks. CNN's Jim Acosta has more.
Not just a Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad, but the world.
It's also important for other totalitarian dictators around the globe who are watching the circumstances unfold in Syria and are watching the international community's reaction to understand that the international community will not tolerate the use of chemical weapons.
The White House said Mr. Obama is still looking at a compressed time frame for action, along with a possible presidential statement on a Syria mission, and did not deny there are doubts about forming a broad international coalition.
Because the American president foolishly drew a red line, and because of his position now, he's going to attack or face humiliation.
Others accused Prime Minister David Cameron of following the U.S. into another war based on faulty intelligence, namely another Iraq.
But this is not like Iraq, and the evidence that the Syrian regime has used these weapons in the early hours of the 21st of August is right in front of our eyes.
White House officials say there's no comparison.
What we saw in that circumstance was an administration that was searching high and low to produce evidence to justify a military invasion, an open-ended military invasion of another country.
But the administration still had to defend President Obama's comments to PBS that somehow Syria could attack the U.S.
There is a prospect, a possibility in which chemical weapons that can have devastating effects could be directed at us.
Does he really think that Syria is capable of launching chemical weapons at the United States? What did he mean by that?
I think what we're very concerned about is the willingness that the Assad regime has demonstrated to use chemical weapons.
Deputy Press Secretary Josh Earnest pointed to allies near Syria, like Israel and Turkey.
That doesn't even get into military bases and other interests that we have in the region.
To make his case, the president called top leaders in Congress from both parties after complaints from one key Intelligence Committee chairman that conversations so far do not constitute formal notification in consultation with Congress. Even some Democrats aren't satisfied.
Chris, I definitely believe that there needs to be a vote.
The White House still plans to release an unclassified intelligence assessment to the public before a strike, but officials warn it won't be the same version shown to key members of Congress. That, a spokesman said, is because they have to protect what they call sources and methods. Jim Acosta, CNN, the White House.
If things continue this way, the UN Refugee Agency says there will be more than 3 million people displaced by the end of this year. CNN's Our Demon shows us the situation in Lebanon. We want to warn you, some of the images in this story may be found disturbing.
I am a doctor. I am a doctor. Dr. Karam tries to soothe her. What's your name? It's Yumna. Am I alive? Am I alive? She cries out. So many of the victims were in the same state, Dr. Karam painfully remembers. Now he fears there is worse to come, especially if the U.S. and its allies strike. This regime, as we have seen in the last 2 years, he says, the more they are backed into a corner, the more vicious they become. Their stocks of atropine, other medicines, and equipment to combat chemical agents have yet to be replenished. Out on the empty streets, one man says, we are stuck in the middle, between the Russians and the Americans, the Iranians and the Saudis, and we are the victims. For those who know the wrath of the regime too well, there is fear that the potential strike is going to hurt the people more than the regime itself. And this man adds, the regime is going to evacuate its people and leave the detainees in bases and airports and say, look, America carried out a massacre. Under the scorching sun in neighboring Lebanon, a team of volunteers is hard at work.
We will be able to host is up to 1,200 families. That's around 10,000 people. But that's nothing compared with the influx expected. Lots of people will stay in the streets.
It's not entirely legal, as the Lebanese government has yet to allow official camps to be established. Tarif describes this effort as refugee crisis triage.
With the new influx, there is no contingency plan to contain the new influx, and therefore we're moving from a very bad situation to a situation where we will not be able to deal with.
At a reception center next to Lebanon's main border crossing with Syria, Omar al-Huwayis just finished putting in an emergency order with Qatar for more humanitarian supplies. We've also told the mosques during Friday prayers to call on people to open their homes when the strike happens, he tells us. Many, especially those from the capital and its outskirts, don't want to talk.
That van is the second vehicle packed with people that we've stopped trying to talk to, asking them if they're fleeing. They all seem to be very agitated, very nervous, saying, no, 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 we're just here for a visit. But clearly, they are very, very concerned.
Panic and fear is everywhere as the region waits for expected strikes from the U.S. and its allies.
Before we end this edition of the news, a reminder of our headlines. The President, His Excellency Sheikh Professor Alhaji Dr. Yahya Jammeh, has stressed the need to enforce anti-littering laws to end indiscriminate dumping during a surprise tour of streets of the capital city. Players in the business of school health and nutrition have been brainstorming on ways of promoting food safety and quality in schools, as well as the personal hygiene of school food vendors. U.S. President Barack Obama has tasked his aides to work out what he calls a compressed timeline as Washington mulls over a response strategy to alleged chemical attack by pro-Assad forces. And the seemingly unending economic woes in Spain are putting the country's scientific research program on the brink of near collapse. Well, that brings us to the end of the news. Thanks for the pleasure of your company. Stay tuned and enjoy GRT's programs.